both sides, both these republics claimed, for example, George Washington.
Yes, they both claim. I'll leave it at that. They both claim George Washington. They wanted to be right with the man, which is what George Washington was. He's the indispensable man, no question. Both sides wanted him on their side. They both quoted Thomas Jefferson, although Confederates were a little more leery of Jefferson because he's too complicated for them sometimes. But no, they wanted to be right with the founders and claimed to be right with the founders. The Confederates would say, the Constitution allowed slavery. What are you talking about? We're out of step with the Constitution. We're in step with the You're the ones who are out of step with the Constitution.
What about the topic of states' rights? At the very least,
I love state rights. State rights. I mean, I love the way people use it with the Civil War. They associate it solely with Southern states, of course. State rights is always available in United States history for somebody who's not happy with what the federal government is doing. During the War of 1812, it was New England that most often talked about resorting to state rights. They had a convention where they sort of wandered over towards secession territory in the Hartford Convention. We think of it as state rights because as you lead up to the Civil War, you hear white Southerners talking about it all the time. We need our state rights. I always love to ask people who say that, what are all the state rights? List the state rights that the white South is concerned. Give me the top three. No, really, just give me the top two. There's only one. The state right that they're worried about is the right of their state to interpose its power between a federal government that might try to interfere with slavery and a state government that wants to maintain it. That's the state right that matters then. Northern states also resorted to state rights during the ramp up to the Civil War with what were called personal liberty laws. They tried to interpose their state power in between a federal government that would use its power to force enslaved people back into slavery. It's whoever's unhappy with the federal government, the concept of state rights is available, and both sides used it.
And of course, the beautiful, dark, ironic hypocrisy was illustrated by the Confederacy when they were the first to pass a national draft in American history.
Lex, irony is wonderful in history. Another thing that I love to teach is that the most intrusive central government in American history, by far, until deep into the 20th century, was the Confederate central government, because it had to do things to keep the war going that it couldn't have done unless the central government stepped in, such as passing the first national conscription law in American history. The U.S. government never forced people into uniform before the Civil War. The Confederates did it first. They did it in the spring of 1862. They passed a national graduated income tax. And when taxing didn't work, when their money became so devalued, they then passed what they called the tax in kind. They would take a percentage of your crop. They allowed the government to impress horses and mules and enslaved labor to work on. All of these were intrusions from the central government that drove true state rights people crazy in the Confederacy. Confederates didn't have political parties because they said the founders didn't want them, so we won't have them. But what they did have was a sort of nationalist, we're going to let the central government do whatever it needs to do. That's Jefferson Davis's wing, and Robert E. Lee's over there too. And the people like the vice president, Alexander Stephens, who said, you can't do all this stuff because the states should have more power. The only reason the war lasted as long as it did is because the central government did things no one ever would have believed they would do. He also got rid of habeas corpus, just like Abraham Lincoln did in selected situations.
And of course, we should really emphasize that on both sides, those volunteers, on the Confederacy, there's a very large number of people, percentage-wise, that volunteered to fight. And then I believe the volunteer period was 1 year. And then there's all kind of funky stuff that the government started doing to trap those people into then serving.
Here's what the Confederacy did.
Yeah.
Nobody thinks the war is going to last a long time in the spring of 1861. So if you enlist for a year, that's probably plenty of time to finish this war. Well, a year goes by and a significant percentage of the Confederate men under arms are due to get out. So what the Confederate Congress did was pass conscription. We're going to make everybody liable to 3 years service. And in the midst of doing that, all you guys who volunteered for 1 year are now in for 2 more years.
Yeah.
Well, that outraged. I mean, you're breaking faith with us, they said. They didn't stop there. Later, they revised it when the war kept going on, and then the 3 years guys were going to get out. Then the Congress stepped in and said, you're in for the duration. The bottom line is, the Confederacy ever gets you in uniform, you don't get out because they keep changing the rules on you. And that was considered, national conscription was considered a fundamental abridgment of individual rights by many people. That's something the government should never force a citizen into uniform. A citizen should volunteer their service. U.S. government waited a year, then it did it in the spring of 1863, although it always respected original terms of enlistment. Never made it to war for the duration the way the Confederacy did.